Hello and welcome back to this episode of the Law of Relevancy podcast. We talk to exciting, fast-moving entrepreneurs, marketing and communications professionals out there doing things today in real time in our markets as things are changing and fluctuating. And today we're joined by Ed Buckley, the CEO and founder of Peerfit. Thank you, Ed. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Appreciate it.
We're super pumped to have you on the show today. Real quick, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Cord Zoen. I'm the CEO and founder of Bake More Pies, a full-service advertising and marketing agency located here in the Tampa Bay area, also home to Peerfit. Well, Ed, let's talk about Peerfit for just a second. So Peerfit, you guys just had some great news on the Inc. 5000, right?
That is correct. Our team is very, very happy. The Inc. 5000 list just became public this week. We were 140, out of 5,000. It's a great place to be.
And that's one of those awards you have to earn. There's a lot of awards out there that, you can kind of invest into and things like that. But that one's one you have to earn. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. They don't tell you what spot you're getting until right before it goes public. But if you're in the top echelon, which we don't know what that means, maybe that's top 100, 200, 300, they actually come in and audit your numbers because you have to submit everything ahead of time. But you get contacted on the second wave if they think you're at some sort of inflection point. And when we got audited, we knew, well, hey, we must be in a good position. But once again, is it top 500, top 1,000? Like, we didn't know where that was. So I was actually on a family vacation in Puerto Rico when they did the announcement. So I came in from the beach, was just sitting there dripping wet, sitting in my hotel room when they made the announcement. And we were very, very honored. It's just a great recognition of what the team has done during the past 3 years.
And your team has grown quite a lot. I mean, you're well over 100 people now, right?
Well, a funny story is one of our board members here in town, Lee Arnold, gave me a book to read years ago. It's called Exponential Organizations. And it's about, once you start seeing a role grow, hey, every X customers, we need to hire a Y person. You should start looking at automating. So you would say every 5X customers, we need to hire. So the idea is, as you start to get more mature as a business, you should actually start being able to decrease the people. So we went from 20 people to 50 people to 100 people to 150 people, and have started scaling our way back down now through automations. So, we're actually down to about 55 people today, but we were at 150. And when we had 150, we were serving probably 300,000 covered lives, members. We've got, over 500,000 launched, with another 200,000 coming up that we're launching over the next few months. So, almost twice as many customers, but with a third the number of people, all through automation. It's been great.
Yeah, automation is key to scalability. But I guess you really can't get to that scale point without the initial idea itself. So tell us a little bit about that story, about what were you doing? What were you thinking? Where were you at when you came up with the idea for Peerfit?
Many moons ago. We're actually just celebrating our 10th anniversary this year. So it was 10 years ago we started the company. I was a grad student at the University of Florida, go Gators. And, while I was a fitness instructor for, my non-academic side, I was wrapping up my master's in public health, about to start my PhD, focusing on digital health behavior. And just this idea at the time, which was, fitness calendars were usually PDFs or print off PDFs. People wanted to hop between classes. They didn't know how to hop between them. What about classes from other places? And what about taking those dollars, from your employer with you? And just kind of this swirling opportunity of what we saw as how do you modernize letting people flow between classes and gyms with themselves, their friends, and the money that is allocated to them. And here we are, 10 years later, and still running, and as many cases of startups, just surviving until you can thrive. And that's what we've done for 10 years is that mentality. And you have long periods where maybe traction isn't what you want it to be, and then you have these brief periods of just massive success, and that's really what I think the startup journey has been like for us, and probably a lot of people that I talk to.
So you had this idea for I guess you identified a problem, right? So let's just kind of go through this entrepreneurial process. And a lot of times when we talk to people, that's the first step is they see something in the environment where they're like, wow, there's really an opportunity here because there's this problem. You identified flexibility with classes. I think even around that same time, this company called Beachbody, what was the name of their workout? They were promoting
They
the
they had
idea
P90X, right? Weren't they the
P90X.
P90X people? Yeah. Well, I mean,
Exactly.
so think about this, right? If people were saying, and research backs this up, the number one reason why someone joins a gym or leaves a gym is the instructor in the classes. I was teaching classes, and I hated that the calendar was a PDF, right? Like I'd say, hey, come to my 4 o'clock class, and people say, well, what do you do in that class? And I hated, as the instructor, I'd be writing my workouts, and I'd be like, why can't someone just click on my class and see what workout we're going to do that night? Why can't somebody click my class and share it to somebody else? Right? I remember, especially going through college, every month the gym had a new calendar, and we'd have to go get it, magnet up on the fridge, and what does this class actually do, or what's the difference between this instructor when they teach or to that instructor? The calendar, both as someone who loves group fitness, consuming it, and teaching group fitness, I felt like I've got to write the workouts. Why can't people consume those to see what we're going to do? And frankly, that problem was, why can't tech be the solution to help the instructor and the consumer more appropriately find and share people that are looking for great classes? And great classes is subjective. What I think is great is might not be what you think is great. And yeah, that was the problem.
Right. Well, there's definitely that inherent cost of friction of being able to change the switching costs to move between classes. And I think, you're obviously very passionate about health for others. Like you can just hear it in your voice. To be able to offer that to somebody and allow them to find what's right for them, or even get some variety. And the reason I bring up P90X is because they were promoting this idea of really dynamically changing what your workout was, and that was shocking your body into getting past those plateaus, or at least the little bit that I tried it before I stopped doing it, of course wasn't for me. Right. But I think what you did, which I'd love to touch on, is number one, you're studying digital health behavior. Did I say that right? Digital
You
health
said it in
behavior.
correct order. That's right.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And which obviously is a part of the health behavior curriculum there in the graduate school there at University of Florida. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. And what was that piece? Because there's a lot of places out there that might have a list or an online calendar of classes, but I think around that time we had this emergence of social media. What was that impetus? Was that part of the curriculum? Was it something that you just naturally knew about peer pressure, so to speak? Like how do you incorporate that social aspect into that calendar? And because really to me it seems like that's, if there's legs to this stool, that was one of them.
So it's a great question. I'll unpack it, but I want to address one thing that you had said about shocking the body. We see that with our own data. You could have people who are fanatical about, one location. Man, I love going to gym X, Y, and Z. But if that's all they do, they get burnt out and then they leave that place. But if they can do 70% of their workouts there and 30% kind of floating around, it helps give them enough dynamic diversity that they stay at that place longer. So I do it, like our own data backs it up. As for, studying at school, it was a magical time to be studying this subject, which was, our health behavior department was, like many, no disrespect to it at the time, was stuck in old legacy styles of health behavior. Local health departments running very traditional, in real person interventions on the most common health conditions: smoking, obesity, physical activity. So those still are alive today, but we were right at the inflection point of, couldn't you use technology to reach these people? Couldn't you use technology to scale personalization? And I was very fortunate to be there. Right, like I said, I think it was the second student in that department where this we had someone who said, let's take these old legacy problems of smoking cessation, obesity, physical activity, and forget about the way that we've always done them. Yes, let's use the principles of psychology and applied behavior, but let's figure out what would you do if you had their cell phone, text messages, social media. How do we use those to reach, remind, and impact people's behaviors around these kind of tent poles? And so I 100% wrapped myself around physical activity. It's what I'm always passionate. I've been passionate about and will continue to be passionate about. So we had people who might have used the same medium, text messaging, but they were going after smoking cessation. Or you might have had somebody who was also doing physical activity, but they were only doing social media and I was doing text message reminders, right? So there was this kind of three-dimensional chessboard of what condition are you going after and what medium are you using. And it was I'm incredibly grateful for what I learned there. And one thing that I learned, as more of an entrepreneur and less as an academic, was part of your PhD is just getting you to question things and getting you really good and comfortable at understanding data and research. I mean, I would say going into it, I was great at understanding the more practical sides of physical activity. But what I learned is just being an expert on reading all of these studies that to the average person, you just read them and you're like, why would I read a 10-page thing when five of the pages are on your measurement strategy? So, it just is making you a little bit more comfortable with that.
Yeah, for sure. And I can only imagine how eye blurring that could possibly be, with some of those medical terms and all of that. Was there any of those studies that you were looking at and that you were learning about where you felt like, hey, this really proves that this idea is going to work?
Yeah, there's quite a few that stick out. So there was one that focused on what leverage you can use on people to keep them going to fitness. And what I found the most fascinating was they find 30 days in, you completely switch why you go to class, right?
Interesting. Tell
And
us
and
more
it's
about
this,
that.
yeah, so it's this idea that for the first 30 days, you go because of external validation. I want to be seen. If I don't show up, people are going to think less of me. I need the proper pats on the back from the instructor and letting everybody else know I'm there. And then about 30 days in, you go because you want to, right? You go because you're committed to your health journey or some reason that is being fulfilled internally rather than externally. But it's so funny that when we think about interventions, we usually think about them as this or that. Let's focus on internal factors or external. And that always reminds me of is, onboarding someone into a routine is a completely different set of values to the individual than keeping someone in a routine.
Are those lessons we could do to say get our kids to do homework? Like where else can we apply that in our lives?
I think it's a great question. I think as humans, right, that philosophy holds true across so many things. Okay, think about getting a kid to brush their teeth. Probably the first 3 weeks of getting them on a schedule is because you're pressuring them, you're nagging them, you're giving them positive rewards and pressure. But eventually there comes a part where like the train's left the station and they're going to do it because they now value why they're doing it. They don't need pressure, they don't need rewards. It's off. They understand the why of why they brush their teeth, right? Probably I'll make a terrible analogy. It's like going to college and being away from your parents for the first time. How many habits slip away that eventually come back, right? Maybe it's you're an 18-year-old boy and now you're only showering 3 times a week because you're like, whatever, I'm in college, and it eventually comes back, right? Or any number of these habits. But we go through this throughout our life, not just as children. And I'd argue, I've been through it as much as I love fitness. If I fall out of it because I get busy and life gets in the way, getting back into it, you go through that ramp. Maybe the ramp's shorter, quicker, and you can get to that other side a little bit more efficiently. But we as humans do this, throughout our life with a number of different behaviors.
Well, yeah, I mean, speaking of behaviors and habits, there's an old saying that ideas are a dime a dozen, right? Execution is everything. So how do we, or how did you rather, let's just look at you first. Um, there's a lot of great ideas out there, right? A lot of people may identify like the next $1 billion idea. How did you take it from this was a good idea to that next step of actually like, what were your next steps to take? Did you raise money? Did you use your own money to build a website? Like, what was that next step to get you to that first pile,
Yeah.
that first piece?
Well, and I'm going to answer this as I go through two ways. What did we do? And what would my advice to people today be? Right? Because there's two different answers
Sure.
now that
Yeah, let's be
I've gone
relevant.
through it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what do we do today? Right.
Yeah. I mean, look, at the time, you have to remember, I'm a grad student who comes from no particular means or money as a family. We're just as middle class as it gets. I don't have connections into people who are raising capital. I'm in Gainesville, where there's essentially very little to no angel funds available. Nor had I ever started a company to the extent of having to raise money. So I was really starting in a kind of not on a good foot from that perspective. First thing that I did was found, kind of my best friends, roommates to be co-founders, and roped them into this idea of what I wanted to work on. Scrounged together about $10,000 of our own money, worked on what we could from like a front end visual design of the website we wanted to, paid overseas workers to help build the back end. And then the things you can control is, I had infinite amounts of time. So calling on as many potential customers, harassing their phone lines to get them on the phone, to get feedback, to give any validation. Are we moving in the right way? And if not, what would you buy? So I think when we finally got to people who were willing to, give us money because they loved us as people, they had seen we were working our tails off. And that is something that I think, everyone can do, right? It doesn't take money to just work your tail off. And you have to remember, I'm a poor grad student, so I'm working 4 jobs while doing this. So the idea of, well, you don't understand, I don't have money. Well, neither did I. What I would say differently now is certainly Florida, in Tampa specifically, has matured in terms of the amount of money and the risk tolerance for early stage startups. I mean, even when I moved to Tampa in 2014, very little money, high risk aversion compared to today, significantly more money, significantly more deals at that early stage being done because of the success of companies during the last few years. So the ability to get that first check, even like $50,000, $100,000, helps put wind at your back to go and try to test a lot of these assumptions. So I'm certainly happy to see the environment here. It took us, a year and a half, probably, what could be done now in Tampa in 3 months.
Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned earlier, one of your good friends, Mark Blumenthal, just put out on his social feeds today that Tampa was ranked number one for
Number one.
tech and innovation startups. Is that correct? Or
As
cities,
emerging tech cities in the United States,
emerging tech
number one. That's
cities.
right. And
Yeah.
thanks a lot to him and his people, right? I mean, Mark is a good friend now because of the relationships we built. I didn't know him from Adam when when I first met him and was asking him for money. So that it shows you what type of a person he is, that we have, a friendship and not just a business relationship all these years later.
Well, speaking of money, let's move on to some other innovations that it seems like what you've created there at Peerfit. So you've created this concept of, you've got this catalog and this variety of workouts that someone who's connected to your site can plug into. You've got this social component where people can invite people to work out with them, or some of those external factors, some of that behavioral psychology or whatnot, right? And then you've created this, I want to call it like Fitcoin. You've got some kind of a currency. It looks like there's credits that you can use at these different establishments. And I assume that's part of what you're doing on the phones, is establish those connections and those relationships to allow people to use your credits at different gyms and studios and places like that. So how did the concept come up to use your own quote unquote Fitcoin or currency with these places?
First off, we've checked and Fitcoin is trademarked. Otherwise, we'd be using the heck out of it, I can assure you. But it was early on, going back to these studies, that early team, we knew the power of not using dollars and using a currency or some sort of a currency to offset the mind, to focus on just the classes, right? There's a lot of studies that show when you give people a token rather than money, it makes them more easily think about, do I want this or do I not want it? Rather than they start to weigh like, ooh, that's $20. What else could I spend $20 on in my real life? And so this was something like really, really early that the team knew we needed to institute. And I'm glad that we did. And it's funny because obviously at the time, like cryptocurrency didn't exist when we did this, and now people are like, turn it into a cryptocurrency. And so it's just very interesting, and we've had a lot of people in the industry copy this model. It just shows like we truly were ahead and validated the thinking that we were on to do what we did 10 years ago, and still it's alive today, so much of that other people in the industry are using it. And it just really helps people focus on, do I want to go to this class or do I not want to go to this class? And not have to think about, man, I can't believe I'm about to pay $20 for a fitness class. Anything that we can do to remove barriers, no matter how small or subtle, to get them into a fitness experience, that's our job.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. I was actually talking to our finance department earlier today, preparing for our interview, and I was talking to her name's Georgia, and I said, "Hey, Georgia, check out this Peerfit system." As a business owner, I'm looking at it as like, wow, this is a really cool benefit for the team. Speaking about not spending $20 on the class or however many credits, how about get the company to pay for it for you?
That's right. That's right.
Right?
Absolutely.
That's
I
that
mean,
other layer you guys are coming up with. And I feel like with all of those things together, I don't know if they happened all at once, if they were part of the original vision, or if these are things that you guys grew into. Maybe unpack that a little bit. Let us know, how does that process of innovation come through?
there are certainly things as you're going through the startup journey that to be true from day one, and they, thank heavens, turn out to be true. Then there are other things that you are like, this is totally 100% how it's going to be. And this is why I need to build the platform this way, or this is why this button needs to be here. And you get it into the hands of the users and they hate it, or it has the opposite impact that you expected it to. I'll tell you, not so much us. We were talking to another company that was trying to do the same thing we were at the time. And they had been giving their people um, basically currency credits, right, to go use for fitness classes. And they reversed it and gave people money to use, and tons of people stopped using it. And they said, oh, it made me guilty to see how much money I was spending. They thought they were being responsible by being more transparent. And, these are adults, let's just give them the money and let them have control. And it had the opposite effect, that people stopped going to classes because of the guilt it gave them. Right. And so for us, we knew currency was always going to be important. And luckily that turned out to be true. The other was, we wanted to buck the trend that said, you need to make the employee pay for it and then you subsidize them after the fact. Every employer wanted to do that. And we had to stand up and go against the grain and say, you're wrong. That's actually all you're going to do, is have the people who are already going to participate. But that group who you really want to get participating, like I said, there's just a handful of small barriers. And if it is, you go and pay for it first and then trust and wait that we'll reimburse you, or you have to go a certain number of times, otherwise we're not going to reimburse you. There's a whole middle segment of the population you're just not going to get to participate. And we didn't go down that route. We've never gone down that route. And there's certainly people who filled that space in the market, but we love the space that we fill. We call it fully funded fitness. And we think that without that, you're just going to leave a lot of people behind. And that's who we're ultimately trying to serve, is that group in the middle.
Yeah, well, you guys have done a really good job of removing those barriers. And it seems like it permeates your entire corporate philosophy and your MOD. Like, even when I look at your website, there's not a ton of fluff about the whole program. It's almost like it's one page and then you're instantly getting into using it. So it is kind of brilliant how you put the whole thing together. So kudos to you guys. It's very succinct and elegant how it's all packaged very well. I have another question for you. So, and I'm love talking about this entrepreneurial process. I think this is helping a lot of people. Like, I love educating people on this show because that's really what we're here for. It's that thought leadership. How do we bring people along and help people kind of achieve some of the things that you've achieved, I've achieved, and make it simpler? So you've done this, you've got this idea. It seems like you've got dogs eating, like you've got the dog food is being eaten by the dogs, like it's working. It seems like the idea is being picked up. How do you know it's now time to go get money to take it to the next level?
I'm not sure that there's ever a universal right answer here, right? But there are a handful of things that help answering that question maybe be a little bit more direct for each person, which is it depends where you're starting from a finance perspective. If you're someone who's been successful and you can finance this reasonably long, the real question becomes, when should you stop financing it and get other people involved, right? That's one question to think about. If you're like me, when we started Peerfit, I mean, $10,000 doesn't take you too far, right? And so the question was, you needed money pretty soon if you were going to really put a genuine effort into this. And so it was, how little of money can you raise and still have it be impactful? I mean, our first round was $40,000, right? Which at that time was like, oh my gosh, $40,000. This is amazing. And now I think back to, when we do rounds today, it's 10, $20 million a round, right? $40,000 wouldn't cover a week of what we are trying to do today. So it's just funny how your perspective changes. But I mean, it just comes down to, what can you do to validate your idea that costs you nothing? As for us, it was calling people, getting commitments, hearing the number of people that would be willing to move forward with us. And that's as far as we could take it without money, right? Ours was a pretty simple reality. We didn't have more money than that. We were broke college students, and that's as far as we could take it. So the question that you have to ask yourself, whether you're coming in with money or you've got somebody else's, is, are you ready to leap into this thing with both feet? That doesn't mean you can't have a side job to help support things, because maybe you don't want to pay yourself or pay yourself very much because you want the money to go to the product. But there's a moment of truth that is, okay, we're going to do this thing. I'm going to take this from a hobby to a company. And if you can look yourself in the mirror and look at the people you're asking to do that, and you can look at your family who's got to be on board and say, I'm going to do this. Are you with me? And the answer is a resounding yes, it's time. But if you aren't willing to commit, how dare you ask other people to
Right.
commit their money to it?
Yeah, that's great validation just to observe. That's why seeing is believing, right? Just checking out the behavior of the people involved. So let's talk about that other moment of truth. So there you are, you've got this great idea. It seems like it's got traction. And then now you, in order to raise money, need to let go of some of it, right? So
Yeah,
what's that
wasn't
like?
great at it in the beginning, was not great at it in the beginning. I don't know if people would describe me as good at it today, but I'm certainly much better than I was. Look, I quote my chief strategy officer all the time. He told me this when he was an advisor to the company, which is, Ed, as CEO, if you're doing things that other people can be doing, you're wasting your time and theirs. As long as you are putting out the fires, you're not building the fire departments
Right.
to do it. There becomes a fine line of helping get in the trenches with your people and doing their jobs for them, right? There's really is a fine line there. And The only way that worked for me is to get feedback from people. Let it be completely kosher that the people you're working with to say, hey, you're stepping on my toes. When you do this versus letting me do it, this is it invalidates me with my own team. So it is just the balance of what type of a leader you are. There are some people who are way more hands off, and their feedback from the people might be, hey, you look kind of absent and passive. Maybe you should lean in more. And then there are people on the other end of the spectrum who want to be in, everything in their feedback is going to be, hey, you need to let others fill that space a little bit. So having great coaches, having great mentors, but having really candid, safe space conversations with those around you is the only way you're going to get to that good equilibrium.
Well, that seems like a very wise thing for you to do, to get a strategy consultant involved early on to help give you some of the advice. Are there any other, you mentioned leadership, are there any other leadership programs or any kind of leadership education that you had specifically about leadership that helped you understand that you couldn't do it all, that you had to let some of it go and motivate people to get the work done?
I read a lot of books. I try to read about 2 books a month, and they're all leadership, management, biographies, autobiographies. So I try to take that knowledge in, and then I have a lot of mentors around me, and I talk with them a lot and constantly get feedback, even if I don't agree with it. And the best part about it is that they all donated their time and attention to do this over the years, and maybe even when we didn't maybe need it because we were such a small company, it helped me. And to have so many different personality types, I get very, very different opinions of things that I should be doing, and it's on me to marry those input and suggestions of the next steps that I'm going to commit to, and which ones I have heard but maybe I don't agree are relevant at this time, or disagree with entirely.
And so early on, what kind of a leader were you and what kind of a leader are you today?
Well, I was probably a bad leader in the beginning. I talked too much. The nickname that was used for me by one of my mentors and stuck with me was the bulldozer. I already had made a conclusion of what I wanted to do, and I was just there to make sure you got on board. And obviously that wasn't great, and it wasn't scalable.
Yeah.
And so I like to think I've gotten better, and I try to listen, as much as possible. But I suppose what I try to be today is a calm leader. I suppose that's what I try to do is be calm, and regardless of whether something's a big deal or a small deal, just approaching it almost dispassionately, which is the opposite type of a person, that I am, but trying to be to somewhat dispassionate about the things that go on around you, so you can maintain a level set, and those around you don't have to deal with energy that you're giving off when they also are trying to deal with a big crappy situation.
Yeah. Oh, I think one of my favorite sayings is from The Art of War. And the quote is, be calm in times of chaos and be chaos in times of calm. And I love that because, obviously being a CEO, as you are, and with us, I mean, we have close to 100 clients, and some clients are having a great day and things are like this. Some clients are not having the best day, and in the day, it just kind of smooths out, right? And if you ride that roller coaster the whole time, like, you obviously care, right? Like, you use the word dispassionate. I know that you're passionate. I mean, we can all tell that you're passionate about everything, right? That's involved with your company, but it is about being smooth and being composed, right? At the
That's
end of
right.
the day, because you can't bleed if you are having one of those bad days, you can't bleed that negative energy into your team. You might demotivate them.
I'm glad you used that quote. It's one of my favorite quotes, and I've always thought about that. You are there to counterbalance, right? What's
Yeah.
going on? If your team is down, be high and pull them, right? If they're spun themselves as high, be low. You are there to counterbalance as CEO and as a leader, whether you want it to or not. Your mood and every action you take is magnified to those around you, and so if maybe people are being a bit passive, get them sparked up for no reason sometimes, just to get them going.
Yeah.
That used to be what I did all the time. So I'm happy to have a second gear now.
That's great, Ed. So let's take a minute. So I mean, obviously, we've been talking about PeerFit this whole time. We've been talking about your experience, but tell us a little bit more about PeerFit. Give us your elevator speech. Tell us what it is, how people watching this could use it, how people who own companies that are watching this might be able to leverage your service. Give us the rundown.
Yeah, absolutely. We created PeerFit to help employers get their employees into fitness experiences. And so whether you're an employer who buys it direct, or for what we do most of the time is we work with their health plans to bake it into their health benefit. So PeerFit as an employer gets PeerFit actually through Aetna, right? Aetna puts it into our health plan and pays for it for our employees to use it. So employers can buy it, their health plans can buy it, and it gives them a number of credits, kind of like a token system at an arcade, and you get to choose how to use it every single month. If you want to use it on a membership to one place and only go there, great. If you want to hop around between yoga studio and cycling studio and CrossFit studio, knock yourself out, and you can change every single month how you do it. And then you can send your invites with those on PeerFit, your coworkers, of where you want to go. So there's really no excuse that if we both work together and this month you're saying, hey, let's go kickboxing. In the old world, it's like, well, I'm not a member there. You're a member there, but I'm not. I can't join you. Now it's like, cool, shoot me the PeerFit invite and let's go. That's really what it's all about, is eliminating those barriers and making it so that peers can say, hey, what do you want to do? Let's go there.
And let's talk about one other barrier. Obviously, we just went through a lot of adversity in the last year and a half or so. Going to a gym has been a major problem for people all over the country, right? You guys now have virtual experiences.
That's right. It was interesting because you've got, depending on the number you listen to, right, 10 to 20,000 physical locations across the country who were told, shut your doors. And almost in no time, as the private market and capitalism forces necessity, almost all of them started going online and doing streaming workouts. And
Mhm.
so not only did you have these more formal streaming entities, like Les Mills on Demand, Forte, and so on, then you also had the mom and pop yoga studio that was like, hey, jump on Zoom and we'll use it as a class. Luckily, we had all those integrations already in place. And we were there helping guide these, giving advice to these people across the country. And within no time, we had 50,000 live streaming classes a week that people could go to. And so those tokens, those PeerFit credits, were still available to them, but they needed a place to spend them, and they were stuck in their house. I mean, I can tell you, our staff, who's all over the country, would say, "All right, who's picking a workout today? All right, let's do a boot camp from New York City." And we'd all go reserve that class, and all of us from around the country would take a boot camp out of New York City from our living rooms. It was amazing. We loved it. And now you're somewhat on the other side where gyms and studios have opened back up, but streaming is still around. So on days, oh, I'm just tired, I want to do a workout right here in my living room, you can do it. And on days you want to go get your butt kicked in person and see other people, you can do that.
That's great, Ed. Well, it's been super exciting, hearing about your journey today and about all the great advice you have to offer us about your journey as in an entrepreneurship, about where you're headed with PeerFit. Tell us a little bit about what's next for PeerFit. What's your next challenge you're solving or barrier you're breaking down?
We just came off of an innovation offsite where we looked at what do we want to do over the next 2 years. So I'm, 3 days off that. Still got the truffle fries weight from Miami with my team on me. But no, it was great. We think that there is a lot of things, as we call it, our own backyard, that there's a lot of opportunity to improve with our existing clients, our existing customers, and improve the stickiness, improve the ability for them to share with their peers, right? We spend all this time and energy and effort to get a client, and you naturally can get X amount of their people to sign up. Well, why can't we get 2x and 3x and 4x, rather than worried about getting 4x the number of clients with that low or middle adoption rate? So that's the thing that we're focused on, is the stickiness and peer-to-peer virality within our existing customers. both on the Medicare and the under 65 side. And while we're spinning up some teams to look at a couple of really cool new initiatives for the next 2 years, how do we use our data in a novel way? How do we partner with maybe some other groups to combine our data in a really useful way for the members? So, I think the future is about, we've captured these people, we've engaged them, we've gotten them into the real life experiences. So what else can we do to help them? So that's really, what's going to be coming next. It isn't just get more gyms, get more studios. It is, how do we serve this user on an ever expanding health journey, and help them help themselves.
Well, Ed, this has been a great education. I really am excited about hearing where you're headed, and I'm definitely going to be following you on your personal website. I believe it's your full name,
That's
.com.
right. Yep. You can follow. I post on Instagram and LinkedIn all the time. If you want to follow the behind the scenes of what I'm doing and what it's like to work at Peerfit, for sure.
I just Googled Ed Buckley and Peerfit to find your personal website, and then we can follow peerfit.com on the socials as well.
Yep. Absolutely.
And you've got a lot of thought leadership out there. You've been on multiple, it seems like, stages. You've been on multiple podcasts, including this one, and around in many other places. So anyhow, thank you again for joining us here. It's been incredible, valuable content for all of us. I think we've all learned a lot, and we look forward to following you in the future.
Of course. Thanks for having me, and thanks for listening.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'd love to have you back sometime. You can follow us anywhere where podcasts are found: Apple, YouTube, social media, all of that. And that's the Law of Relevancy podcast. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us. We'll see you next time.